What do you need to release because it is no longer serving you? Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. In today's video, we're having a look at some more tools. We're having a look at some more techniques on how to release belief systems that are no longer serving you. So good morning if you have just joined us live, and hello if you are, of course, watching in the replay. Lots of love to you. Today's theory is, it was proposed or spoken about by a gentleman called Damon Cart. And Damon Cart talks about belief systems, and the tool is based on an NLP technique he calls universal quantifiers, which is apparently a meta model, very fancy words for, I suppose this is what we do is, and this is quite interesting that I'm saying it, because we have to, as humans, label things. We have to put things in a box. And this is interesting because this is what Damon actually talks about, is he talks about how all beliefs that we have, every single belief that we have, is limiting in some form or another. So a lot of this we've spoken about, but this is quite interesting because what he says is that between the ages of 0 and 7, what we're doing is we are observing everything around us. And what we're doing is we're observing through our 5, 6 senses. So let's imagine that here you are and you're observing. Then you see this situation happen. Then you see this situation happen, this situation. And, all that's happening is you are observing lots of random different situations. But interesting that when we observe something, what are we doing, guys? We're observing it through our 5 senses. So I see something, I hear something, I touch something, but what I'm doing is I'm observing it. Many psychological theories talk about the input, process, and output model. So there's an input, process, and an output. So the input comes from your different senses. You then process it through cognitive ways of thinking, and then you output a belief system. You output a thought. Now, this is what I love. So let's imagine that you're seeing something. You're observing something. What happens is that firstly, it begins the first process of generalization or limitation, or what do you call it when you minimize it or you don't see it in its, not general, I'm thinking of a word, limitation. Okay, Spirit, what is it? When you see something, let's say filtering. It's not the word I'm looking for, but it is, let's say filtering. You begin the first process of filtering. Okay. So you see something, you filter it through the lens of whichever sense you are consciously aware of at that time. You then process it through different types of cognitive processing, and then an output happens. So there's two filtering processes. And then what you do is there is an output. So there is a belief system that takes place, which is quite interesting, is because the output, the belief system, the thought, is very limited. So if we go back to the very beginning where all of this started, would you agree with me, and type in yes if you agree in the comment section, would you agree with me that if we go back to the very beginning, this is where our power is to really tap into the possibility of all that is possible for us in our lives? Type in yes in the comment section if you agree. And this is very interesting for me. But going back to what Damon Cart says, he talks about how all beliefs are limited because they are based on generalizations. So let's say 0 to 7, you're observing all of this that's going on. Okay. Now, all of this is random. And then what happens is that after time you think, okay, interesting. So most of the things that I'm observing are accumulating here and here. So this must be the way the world works. If you see something happen often enough, the unconscious mind takes it to be true. So this and this is how your unconscious mind bases all possibilities on. This is how what the unconscious mind talks about in terms of how the world sees what the truth is for you. Okay? So, Spirit said all of that. This must be the way the world works. And then what we do is then we acknowledge it as a truth. We take it as an absolute fact. Isn't that interesting? So unconsciously, this is now the absolute fact of your reality. But what about this and this and this and this and this and this? These are the truth of what happened in that particular situation. But unconsciously, this and this is now the truth of your reality. And this is what I think is really, really interesting. This is a limitation and this is a limitation. So these belief systems are limitations, even if they are positive belief systems. All belief systems, all thoughts that we have, all beliefs are limitations because we have generalized them. We put them into a schema. Psychology talks about this, where we have to put things into chunks in order for us to understand them. So we generalize. Now, Descartes talks about an NLP model. It's a meta model that talks about universal quantifiers. And this is a way of us identifying what some of these generalizations are. So what is it that you've put in this circle? And these universal quantifiers are when you say things like always, when you generalize everyone and everything into a particular box. Always, never. So for example, men never listen. Women are, Damon talks about, women are always late. Women are flaky. So this is a generalizing statement, isn't it? And it's putting people into the same box. And as I was thinking this morning, I thought one of mine is, I'm always busy. So you never listen. This is something that is a quantifier, these types of statements. So how do we begin to break free? How do we begin to release these particular beliefs? Well, first thing that we want to do is we want to challenge the question. Okay, so I am always busy. Men never listen. So what we do is we then challenge that. And you ask a question. You ask a challenging question. Men never listen. Okay, so you say, is this true? Can you find another example of where a man has listened to you? So what you begin to do is you begin to ask a you begin to ask a challenging question where you begin to challenge the generalization. Men never listen. I am always busy. Okay, so can you think of a time when you were listened to, when a man did listen to you? Interesting. Yes, I can think of one now in my head. Men generally do listen to me. This is not a belief system of mine, but we all know people who do feel this, or you are that person who feels that men never listen, or women never listen, or you are misunderstood, or no one understands you, all these belief systems. Okay, so can you think of a time when you weren't busy? Actually, think about your day and think about maybe when you're not busy during your day. Okay, there we go. I've now thought of another time in my day when I am not busy, or I've thought of some times during the week when I'm not busy. And what's important is to find counter examples. You ask a challenging question, and then you find counter examples of this generalization that you have created. And he talks about how generalizations are actually really healthy, because this is what we all do on an unconscious level. And they are healthy if we understand that they're actually not the ultimate truth. If you look at this big picture, it's not the ultimate truth, because we know that there are other versions of the generalization. And we can always find a counterexample. If you make generalizations, they're healthy if you know that you can always find another example. There are two sides to every story. There is a counterexample to every generalizing belief system. Okay, so how do we let it go? Damon Carr talks about how, firstly, what we do is we identify it. So you identify it through those, through those universal quantifiers. So you identify it using those words, always, never. Then what you do is you ask yourself, what is this doing for me? And we spoke about this in week 2, I believe, when we looked at what was the need. What is it that it was doing for you? Damon talks about it being a positive intent. What is the positive intention of this belief system? So it may not be serving you now, but remember, it was serving you when it was created. So what was the positive intent? Then what we do is we look at how can we combine the positive intent with a new belief system. So this is something I need to work on a little bit more, because if I think, okay, I have a belief system, I am always busy. What is the positive intent? Okay, if I'm always busy, then people will think that I'm actually really good at my job, I'm more credible, I'm more of an expert, people will see me as good enough. There we go. Positive intent, people will see me as good enough. So, what happens if I take this positive intent, I am good enough, and I add it to a new belief system? Okay, so the new belief system I can give myself is, I can work less and still be good enough. I need to play around with this a bit, but I'm working it through with you guys. Maybe you can give me some ideas as well, because this is what we're doing, is we're walking together. So what can the new belief system be like? Okay, so we can ask ourselves this question, what would my life look like if I was less busy and people still thought I was good enough? What would my life look like if I was less busy, I worked less, but still felt good enough? Because this is what it's about, is about that feeling of being good enough. That's the source belief underneath absolutely everything, isn't it? We've spoken about this. So what would my life look like if I still felt good enough, but I didn't work as much? I had more time on my hands. Wow, the energy has really shifted in my body. I feel lighter. So then Damon talks about how we don't need to have two extremes, working a lot and not working a lot. So what I could do is I could still work less, have lots of clients, feel good enough, and I don't need to choose between the two. So I could be both and still have that energy. So what would our lives look like? What would it look like for us if we felt good enough in every moment? And it doesn't matter if I'm busy or not busy. It doesn't matter what the outside is like. The outside is not making me feel good enough, because I know that I feel good enough, because that's the positive intention of that original belief system, was that I felt good enough. This is great how we work things together. And then what you do is you connect it with a positive emotion, which is what I've just done in my processing, is I connected with a feeling of worth, value, joy, excitement, lightness, expression, and vibrancy. So you connect that positive intention with a positive emotion. And this positive emotion we'll look at in step 6, is it really increases the vibration of who you are. So, any belief system that you want to process, feel free to write it in the comment section below so we can all see, because it's very helpful, isn't it? If somebody processes and works through this with you. So, the willingness within me to look at the positive intent of my limiting belief systems so that I can link it with a new belief system that has a positive emotion, creates the willingness within you to do the same. I wish you a wonderful day exploring all the different ways that you can release these limiting beliefs, because on Friday in video 5, I'm going to invite you to write your own technique. Namaste, my beautiful souls. I'll see you in video 3. Bye.